Today I'm going to talk about a few articles on yours as well as one other article that I found. It's sort of in the news today. So the first one I want to talk about is a proposal from some Bitmain developers that was evidently written in Chinese on a WeChat group for Bitmain, and Cindy Daly has translated this to English for those of us in the English-speaking world to be able to read this. And they have a proposal for how to do tokens on Bitcoin Cash. And their proposal is called Wormhole, and it is a fork of Omni. Omni, originally called Mastercoin, is basically a colored coins protocol on Bitcoin. Whether it's really colored coins or not is a separate technical question, but it's a protocol for doing tokens. And so what they've done is they've just forked it and made it work on Bitcoin Cash. Now, Omni has one, let's call it Wormhole, I guess. Well, let me first talk about Omni. So Omni has its own coin, which I think is called Omni, which you have to use Omni. And so if you have another token, there are actually 3 tokens involved. There's the token that you care about. Then you also have to use Omni to be able to send and receive this other token. And then there's also Bitcoin Cash, which is used to actually pay the transaction fees under the hood. So there are actually 3 tokens with Omni, whereas with some of the other colored coins protocols, there is no third token. There's just a token you care about as well as Bitcoin Cash under the hood to pay transaction fees. So that's sort of an issue. I mean, I regard that as being undesirable, that it's yet another token. It's a utility token is what it is. And most of these utility tokens seem kind of like technically pointless. Bitcoin Cash fully solves the issue that we care about, which is how to incentivize miners to secure the chain. We don't need yet another token. It doesn't really serve any technical purpose. It might serve an economic purpose, which is maybe they want to raise money and then you can use that money to do marketing and stuff like that to get people to use the coin. So maybe it actually will end up working out after all. Maybe we actually do sort of need a new token for economic reasons. Personally, I'm more interested in the other approaches that do not require a new utility token. So we'll see what ends up happening with this proposal here. Evidently, if I'm reading it correctly and if it's translated correctly, they have this working already, which is believable because they forked an existing protocol. So it's really great to read this, although at first read, this is not my preference for how to do tokens on Bitcoin Cash. I'm personally most interested in colored coins at the present moment. As I said, I think yesterday, I'm collaborating with some people to create a new document on a colored coins proposal. So we'll see. We'll see how that stacks up against Wormhole. All right. So another thing I want to talk about is this individual. I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce his name. I'll do the best I can. Stein Havard Ludvigsen. Who, if I remember correctly, also goes by the name of Norway, because I think he lives in Norway, wrote 2 articles on yours about 2 related subjects. So the first article, it looks like he started writing this one on group versus Tokeda first, and then realized he made an interesting discovery, so he wrote another article. So the group versus Tokeda article is about these 2 different proposals for tokens on Bitcoin Cash, Group and Tokeda. And they're fundamentally different because a couple reasons. First of all, Group requires that we change the consensus protocol on Bitcoin Cash in order to do it. So it requires a bigger change. We actually have to change stuff in Bitcoin Cash itself to be able to do Group. Tokeda does not require any changes. But there's some advantages to Group, like the fact that it's properly permissionless in the way you'd expect a fully permissionless token system to be, which is most significantly does not require the issuer to sign every transaction like Tokeda does. And so what Stein is doing here is basically to criticize Tokeda and to sort of push in favor of Group. Because basically, to some of us in the industry, it's kind of odd that anybody would think that there's no value in having a permissionless token, considering Bitcoin Cash itself is a permissionless token. The only argument I could see that makes sense would be something like saying that I could see a lot of arguments against Group, I should say, primarily because it requires protocol changes. But the arguments that make sense are things like first of all, it's just we need to have a very high bar for consensus changes to Bitcoin Cash. So it's not clear that group is necessarily the right way to do this if we're going to have to change the protocol. Group has at least one undesirable property, which is, in my opinion, the way these group identifiers are created involves setting a nonce and then trying to get the hash to have one of these bytes correct in one of the inputs. It's kind of weird. It doesn't seem like the correct solution to me. But I also don't understand group well enough, and it's not like I have a better proposal myself. So I can't comment on whether I think it's necessarily the best way to do on-chain. Certainly, I don't have a better way that involves consensus changes to Bitcoin Cash. And Tokeda, I like Tokeda a lot. I mean, number one, Tokeda does not require any changes to the Bitcoin protocol. I also like that Johannes is extremely thoughtful about the incentives of the miners and making sure that Tokeda aligns well with their incentives to make sure Bitcoin Cash itself is still like secure, basically, that the miners are still correctly incentivized to secure the chain. I believe Tokeda satisfies that property, but it's not really what we're looking for if the issuer has to sign off on every transaction. I'm sure that Tokeda has some use cases, but I don't think that it solves everything. I think we need one that's permissionless. And so the other argument I can see against group is something like basically the fact that it's threatening to Bitcoin Cash as a token. And I think this is probably what some of these people are thinking. They're really worried that by introducing other tokens that this threatens the value of Bitcoin Cash. I don't really think so, just because so long as Bitcoin Cash, and I think it is something we have to think about. This is related to the miner incentives. We got to be sure we do this correctly. But I think that these other tokens are going to be extremely different, and because Bitcoin Cash has a privileged position as the basically the money of the system, I don't really think that these other tokens are going to threaten the money stance of Bitcoin Cash on Bitcoin Cash's own blockchain. Bitcoin Cash is still fundamentally different than any of these other tokens because, it's used to pay transaction fees, basically. I mean, it's really the money built in. And the other tokens are always going to be secondary to that. So I'm not personally worried about that, but I feel like, it deserves being written down and being addressed, but I don't really think the tokens really threaten the value of Bitcoin Cash. Okay, so the other article from Stein is on how to solve UTXO growth. And the basic idea here is that sometimes you should pay a transaction fee, but actually there are reasons why the transaction fees could be different in size, in a way unrelated to the size of the transaction. So basically, if you're cleaning up UTXOs, maybe not only do you not have to pay a transaction fee, but maybe you should actually be paid by the miners. Maybe the miners will actually pay you if you're able to clean up a bunch of UTXOs. So for instance, imagine you have 300 UTXOs, and what you do is you accumulate them and you spend them into one new UTXO. Now the UTXO set is smaller by 300, which is good for miners. This it gives them less to worry about. So maybe what they do is they actually pay you to do this. And the way they do that would be something like, there are many different ways it could work, but Stein's proposal is that they just make a payment to whatever the first output is in your cleanup transaction. So they will literally, not only do you not have to pay transaction fees in that case, but you actually earn money by cleaning up the UTXO set. Sounds like a cool idea to me. I think that's a real idea. I don't think I've heard this particular idea before. I have heard the idea that cleaning up the UTXO set maybe is free. I don't think I've ever heard of miners actually paying the people that create transactions, though. That's a new idea. So that's cool. So I'd recommend reading all these articles. They're interesting. These are all interesting articles. The Bitmain Wormhole proposal and both of Stein's articles are all worth reading, whether you agree or disagree. All right, there's one other article I want to talk about. I just happened to read this by chance this morning on Hacker News. There's some company called Liberapay that, as best I can tell, is some way to give donations to content creators, I think. I didn't really look into it. I read the article. I'm not going to do a bunch of research on their company yet. But it's interesting that, so they have a payment processor called MangoPay, which is choosing to no longer support Liberapay. And it seems that the reason is, well, it's unclear. And they say in the article that actually they don't know why. They just have their payment processor shutting them down. but I found in the Hacker News comment thread some links and stuff, and maybe what's actually going on is they had one controversial user. And so the thing is, with these payment processors that have to comply with AML KYC, sometimes the banks that they cooperate with get uneasy over certain people. And so basically what might be going on here is Liberapay is being shut down by their payment processor because their payment processor got contacted by some banks about some of the users. At least one of the users was like bad, somebody they don't want to be servicing. And so that's probably what's going on. I don't actually know, but it's just interesting, of course, because with cryptocurrency, gosh, if they were just using cryptocurrency, there would be no way to shut down Liberapay. So maybe Liberapay ought to be using cryptocurrency. Now, I'm not going to bother to reach out to these people myself yet because they're sort of like basically they would be a prospective partner for the money button. But because we're in the midst of this epic rewrite and redesign of the money button, I don't want to bother reaching out to them quite yet. I'm just going to wait at least another month until we're finished with the new money button before I do stuff like that. But this just deserves to be noted that people are still having these basic issues with payment processors, basically due to just the way the traditional payment system works. So anyway, that's all the news I have for today. And I'll keep doing these videos on a daily basis about the money button and all the issues related to the money button. So thank you for watching.